apparently they changed the shoulder dystocia drill slightly. So it's not the one that I read up on once upon a time. I'll have to ask next time. But yeah, it was suprapubic pressure and oh, actually, yeah, they changed that. They changed that part, how you apply the pressure. But I can't remember how to do it. That's why we need the certified nurse midwife so they can say, oh, yes, we know this. This is how we handle it in the hospital. Bless them.
Yeah, I had to learn that whole protocol for my exam when I took the NARM. But it's been so long now, I don't remember it. So, I mean, they do make us learn some of these things, you know.
Do you ever use it in the field?
Some of it, like you kind of pick and choose what you can do, kind of in a out in the field type situation. But we never did drills, you know, because yeah, very rarely did we ever do a drill.
Not even neonatal resuscitation?
No.
Oh my gosh.
We would have our classes in neonatal resuscitation every couple of years. And that was the only time we ever did any kind of drill. Yeah.
And I have to say that it's so bad that not drilling, that not even practicing anything, that on one of the tragedies, the student midwife who called 911 did not know the physical address of the facility.
That's one that happened at my old birth center. Yeah, she did not know the address. It wasn't posted anywhere. And I know that we had discussed posting it, and we had decided it looked too institutional to have your address and things like that posted on the wall. And we wanted it to look very homey. So it was not posted anywhere.
I mean, that's the basic thing you would give if you had someone do childcare in your home, is you would say, okay, this is exactly, here's all the numbers you need, here's your address, here's our emergency, here's everything. I mean, you would do that just for childcare, for a babysitter. And I actually watched someone, it wasn't birth related. I was getting my son a haircut, and someone brought in an elder in a wheelchair, and he had an episode, and his caretaker asked the person at the front desk to call 911, and she completely blanked on what her address was. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really do actually feel for someone in that situation. They're like, oh, I have no idea at this moment.
Shocking.
All the more proof of why you should deliver in a hospital. Nobody needs to know the hospital's address when you're 14 steps from the OR. Like, brain farts are great. That's fine. It's a human thing. But the OR's that way. And you're good.
And I actually work in a level 4 hospital in the NICU, and I go to deliveries to every section, and we have NRP posted right in front of us. And even though we do it every day, we still have a visual reminder.
Yep.
We're human. We're not perfect.
Exactly. And you guys run drills, I'm sure. And you guys practice and updating constantly.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah. I mean, we have sim labs. Well, we haven't had sim lab because of COVID, but under normal situations, we have sim lab. When we have a code, we have a video camera above our resuscitation bed, and we review them. And the doctors and audio, video, and what was scary to me, Danielle knows my background, but you're not practicing skills in midwifery on a regular basis. So if you had a mom that had a hemorrhage, can you get an IV in less than 30 seconds? Probably not, because you're not doing it on a regular basis, things like that. So
yeah, definitely not. I know that we were taught how to insert IVs in school. But then actually in South Carolina, it's not legal for us to do an IV. So even if we know how, we're not allowed to do it. And, so it's kind of interesting the way that the laws are. In some ways they make sense. For example, in South Carolina, midwives are not allowed to suture the perineum or anything for that matter. Which, you don't want untrained people doing hack jobs on perineums. But what the reality is that there are just tears that go completely untreated, unsutured all the time. And like, you know, you find a blog post that says, you don't need sutures, you need seaweed. I swear this is making this up. They will put seaweed on this person's perineum and tell them to keep their legs closed. And then they'll swear, oh, and it healed beautifully. It healed better than any sutures I've ever seen. You know, and I definitely, you know, there were a lot of tears that my instinct was always to transport for a tear, always, because I couldn't suture it. And I would always be like, okay, so here are your options. You have a tear. You don't have to go to the hospital. I probably would. But if you don't want to, then you have to agree to keep your legs together, blah, 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 and give her the care. And most women are on that birth high.
Feel anything?
They're like, yeah, I don't feel like, you know, after that glorious experience, I'm not going to any hospital now. So most of them just decided to keep their legs together and hope for the best. And I mean, I hope that their pelvic floors are holding up, but I'm sure some of them aren't. And you know, that is one thing I feel weird about that law, because I mean, I was trained to suture in midwifery school. It was legal in Florida. And some of those tears probably would have been better off if I had sutured them, but some of them, you know, maybe I would have messed them up, you know, and I learned, I'll put this in air quotes, I learned how to tell the difference between a severe and a minor tear, but I'll be honest with you, I never felt confident that I was sure what degree of tear I was looking at. It's hard to tell until you've really got some really good experience under your belt. You don't know. You can say, look small, look shallow, but do you really, I mean, could I say for sure this is a second degree versus a third degree? No, I honestly wouldn't have known. So, and one of the worst birth complications I ever had was a 4th degree tear that I thought she was hemorrhaging from her uterus. But it turns out she was hemorrhaging from a 4th degree tear, and I couldn't tell the difference. So she was transported by ambulance, and they had to you know, put her back together in the surgical suite. They couldn't even do it in the room. Yeah, so that was a bad one. But you know, so it's kind of like, what do you do with these laws? Where it's like you're not allowed to insert an IV, therefore you don't keep up your skills and you have no idea how to do it. I mean, you'd be lucky to get that IV catheter in. But then it's like, but you also don't want to just give carte blanche. Anyone who wants to start an IV can do so. So.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Do you think that sometimes these states are reluctant to just outright outlaw home birth in any way? So they're trying to make the standard of care in, because when you look at it that way, when you take a bird's eye view and see your midwife won't be able to get an IV in you if you need one in an emergency. She won't be able to do this, won't be able to do that. Do you think that the state is kind of trying to step back and make it almost like a buyer beware situation, but we're trying to make it obvious to you that this is not a good choice to make?
I think it's
Possible.
Yeah, it's possible, but I think the state just really, which is ironic, especially in South Carolina, because we just had some sort of heartbeat bill go forward about abortion, but they just don't want to get involved. And they want to have a veneer that, yeah, we do care, but really in actuality, the best way to care is to not recognize, if you don't recognize any lay midwifery, any lay credential at all, the CPM or the traditional or whatever you want, just don't even recognize it, not licensed, then those women those who want to be birth attendants will only go to home births. And then I guess in my mind, I'm like, well, if you know you have a home birth, if you know you're at home, that's sort of, you already know you're not going to get, you probably won't get an IV. You probably, because you're at home. You got foil, you got saran wrap, you got some bag, you might have a broom, but you don't have, anything medical there at your own home. And that to me is the way to solve that, is to really outlaw that credential and make it really, if it's your informed choice, if that is a woman's choice, because there's always going to be home births, even if it's a precipitous, it could be accidentally at home, you suddenly, you're by yourself, you can't drive, and you have the baby at home. I mean, it's always, you can't outlaw it, but you can make it so if you do choose that, you really are, you're on the fringe. And so you know that it's like some sort of inherent, the risk. And that's why I don't like birth centers, and especially because they're not like the different laws. Like, oh, some can have an IV, some can suture, some can take VBAC, some can't, just.
Now, I know New York State allows a surprising amount from CNMs. I don't really know if that extends over to the CMs, and that's kind of like the gray area with my situation. But it is always very surprising to hear that, because if I'm not mistaken, a CNM in a home birth or a birth center situation can administer IVs in New York. I think they're allowed to stitch. I'm not really sure. I know they do this. I know I've seen several New York State midwives boasting about doing these things, so I hope they're boasting in a legal way. But it's always very surprising to hear how different states take that kind of like laissez-faire approach to it and navigating the different issues within their own states, and kind of just muddying the waters for parents who are trying to have babies to understand what they're taking on with the choices they make.
I think it has to do with actually the state legislators themselves. They are not medically trained. They do not understand birth. They do not understand children. They do not understand there's different types of CPNs, or not CPNs, but midwives. And there's so much that they just don't know. And I can say that because here in Nevada, I have no laws. If you actually look up midwife, like just look up midwives in our laws of the state of Nevada, you can get on the website. It actually says, the last thing that was ever posted was 1984. It says there is no laws for midwifery. Literally, that's in my laws. There's nothing here. So, but of course, nurse midwives are different. They're held to a different standard because they're medical, they work in hospitals, they have different stuff, they're licensed. Now, I've spent years communicating, contacting legislators, contacting lawyers, talking to medical people, talking to all these different people. There's such a gap, they don't understand. I have to literally, if I was to when I go to contact anybody, I've talked to mayors, I've talked to everybody, okay? When I send them a message, I have to make it so simple. Like, we have a problem in Nevada. This is what's happening. Babies are dying, babies are being injured, and we need to make, I have to create the awareness. Some I have talked to have heard about it. Some of them are like, oh, I'm a little bit, we don't have birth centers here. That is one thing I can tell you, that we just have not had birth centers here. Because I think if you put a birth center here, that means you have to start regulating them. And that means they have to start looking into them. They have to understand their titles. They have to understand what they can do and what they can't do. And I think that's a whole nother level that they don't want to deal with. They're like, look, we have hospitals, okay? Just go to the hospital or have your baby at home. We don't want to hear about the in-betweens. We don't want to hear about what's going on at home. They just don't want to hear about it. And unfortunately, that's my experience, is that I've noticed people are making laws, but they know nothing about the laws that they're making. I was with other states up in the northern states. I was on call and I went on different things, helping other states because they were passing to do the, they were doing some state laws to license, basically hand over a license to midwives, but have no regulations on them at all. So they literally are like, here's your license, but there's nothing. There was nothing, no accountability, no nothing. And so I was on the call for this. And unfortunately, when it came down to the vote, what happened is that the guy said, okay, first off, there was a really old guy, super old. He'd been on the board he's been in the politics, he's been in whatever. He said, I'm going to vote no on this because we don't know enough about this. I'm not a medical person. I feel like I cannot answer this. And I feel like if I say yes, I could hurt families. I could hurt babies. I could hurt women. I feel like I am not the person that you should be asking. I should not be voting this. He was the only person that voted no. I think there was one other person because they were on the fence. They just voted no too. It was passed because they didn't know. And you know what one of the guys said? One of the guys said, I'm going to vote yes because you know what? Go ahead. It's their choice. It's their choice. They'll know the risk. They'll know. If their baby dies, their baby dies. Literally, that's what they said. They were like, if it happens, it happens. And the old guy at the end, I'll never forget, before we hung up on this conference call and this big call with their state, I'll never forget him saying, you guys have just made the biggest mistake of our state because we are going to see so much carnage and so much pain from the families in our state. Like, I'm ashamed that you guys didn't take this that we should, because he kept saying we need to go to doctors, we need to go to medical people, because they lobby. There's a lobby thing with the midwifery people and the followers. They lobby and they go to the courthouses and they say this is a good idea, but they're not telling all the other parts of it. Now, it has been slung around here for licensing. It has been slung around here for having the bill out to Medicaid, Medicare, all these different things, but it doesn't go through for whatever reason. Somebody's been kind of holding it back. And I'm thankful for that. That's all I can be thankful for. But I do know there's been people that have been trying to push them to be licensed here, but not regulated, which is the biggest mistake we could possibly make. Why does a doctor and a nurse have to be held accountable, but not a midwife? Like, just why? It doesn't matter what level midwife you are, what training you have, you should be held accountable, or you shouldn't have a license. So that's my experience with that. Like, Megan, exactly what it is. But go ahead.
The point of having a license is having the ability to take it away. But if you're like NARM and you just give a midwife a license and then say, if you have a complaint, talk to us and we'll look into it and we'll never take anyone's license away. It's like, okay, this is a racket I need to get into. Just sign me up, give me credentials, and look the other way if anything goes. Christina, I have a question for you. This may or may not be, if you want to include it, Danielle. My son was born in distress. Also, White as a Ghost had a hematocrit of moving gunshot wound, which is really alarming for a newborn. How often have you seen that? And no, it wasn't something like what do they call it? Auto immunization, whatever, sensitization. Now, as far as we know, he bled out in utero.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like he had low volume, and that could have been some type of abruption, some type of cord accident. I've been in my NICU. I'm in a level 4 NICU since 2013, so 7 years, and I'm just now trained in this last year to go to resuscitation. So that's how long it takes at my hospital. You have to build up your experience before you have to prove yourself that you can handle these situations. And I've only seen it once, and that baby didn't make it. So I'm glad your baby's okay. So those type of situations do happen in the hospital, but thankfully they're pretty rare because we get there pretty early. So yeah, white is usually a volume issue. Lost volume.
Yeah, he ended up with cerebral palsy, but he's doing well.
Yeah, he had a hypoxic injury too, probably because of lost volume. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Christina.
We do see HIV, but it's different there's different reasons for brain injury. So.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for Christina as well. I know that we all know the importance of minutes, but can you try to give the briefest statement that you can about the importance of minutes and how they can affect your baby if something goes wrong in labor?
Wow, that's a really good question. Time is brain. We use that in adults.
That's a perfect statement.
Time is brain. So the longer it takes, the more brain cells you're injuring. But how a lot of midwives, from my experience, justify that is neuroplasticity and things like that, because the baby's brains are so underdeveloped when they're born, and you don't get full brain growth until you're 5. That's how they justify some of these things. But again, we just don't know. We don't know. It's a matter of time is brain and development with a baby that's been injured. Don't know how severe the injury is going to be. So, and we do have things to protect the brain after the baby's been injured. We do that at my hospital as well. We do total body cooling, where we thermically drop their body temperature to heal the brain. And but that's still being studied. So, and we're a cooling center at my hospital too, so I get to see that as well.
In your NICU, how often, if ever, do you see home birth transfers?
We see them. Yeah. Even the midwife that allowed my baby to die has transferred to my hospital, and I have taken care of some of her patients. I need to be careful what I say. So, but yeah, we see it quite a bit.
I wanted to speak to neuroplasticity, and I see it kind of magic wanded. Is kind of way of dismissing brain injury. The thing you need to know about neuroplasticity is it's the ability of the brain, certain areas of the brain, to take over the function of areas that are damaged or missing. Now, the important thing is the more brain you start with, the more neuroplasticity can help. The more injury, damage, and loss of brain tissue, the less neuroplasticity comes into play. So the more severely injured a person is the less you can expect for any miracles to happen. So I really, really dislike this particular trope.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
I also think it's important to say, you know, when you have a home birth and maybe there was some loss of oxygen, you're not going to be followed up by the team that is, you know, trained and can spot the issues that the baby may have. And like I think Christina said, you may not see these till years down the road. So you need to have the baby, the child, followed for years to come. And I think Megan got off, but her baby is a prime example too of what happened at her birth in a hospital. So it's, you know, a hospital is the best option. I know some women, birthing people do not like that, but it is the safest for the baby in the end. And, you know, the birthing person, period. But it is, you know, at the hospital, they do have people, medical professionals there that study this, that see everything under the sun that the home birth midwife or the home birth midwives, you know, helpers that do not see it and are not trained for it, even if they've seen it once and have dealt with it 5 years down the road previously, they don't see it now. So it's something to take into consideration.